Hi, I'm Lisa King, and I'm the state committee woman for Duval County. I was a delegate in 1992 and 1996 and 2008, but I have attended every Democratic National Convention since '92 as a volunteer or a guest. Well, my first time running for delegate was in 1992, and I had chaired the local Bill Clinton efforts here in '92, and so I kind of assumed that because of that I would just show up at the election and I would get elected because people would recognize the leadership role that I had provided. And I had a very abrupt education because I wasn't elected. Just so you understand the process, any registered Democrat can run to be a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. However, the number of slots available to you here at the district level are based on the percentage of the vote that each candidate gets in that congressional district. So what I found out was that how you win is not by attending the caucus and handing out brochures and convincing the people that are there. What I learned the very hard way was how you're elected is you bring your voters, you get out the vote. And you'll probably pick up a few votes there at the caucus, but that's not how you win. My understanding of the Republican process in the state of Florida is that they caucus at the congressional district level as we do, but they have a committee that picks those delegates. In Jacksonville, there were 3 delegates chosen and 3 alternates. And a committee of 9 people selected who those people were. From what I understand, only 8 of those were actually attending, and 4 of the people on that committee were actually candidates for delegates. So it is a much more controlled and internal process. While in the Democratic Party's process, any registered Democrat who lives in that congressional district can go and vote for the delegate of their choice. I think it's more open and it's more democratic, and so it really depends on what your preference is, and that's my preference. Well, I'll tell you a story first about delegate selection. In '92, the interesting thing was at that time, you had to actually say which presidential candidate you were supporting when you filed your paperwork before the election had taken place. So you weren't really sure how many delegates were going to be available for you to run for. So it was a bit of a gamble. So I had several friends who were involved in Paul Tsongas's campaign in 1992. And in fact, their chairman lived a block from me in Riverside. So the news media loved it because when they needed to do interviews, they could get both of us really quickly because we lived a block apart. Actually, former State Senator Tony Hill, he at the time had not served in elected office yet, ran as a Tsongas delegate even though he had not been active in that campaign, and showed up at the election with a school bus full of his supporters, and he was elected. And the Tsongas people were just jaws on the floor. They were like me. They'd never done this before. They didn't know how the system worked, and so they just assumed because they were Tsongas leadership, they were going to get elected. So like me, they learned some really hard lessons that day. But '92 was my first convention. It was in New York City, and they really roll out the red carpet. They know how to throw a convention, and it was incredibly exciting. At a Democratic National Convention, like a Republican National Convention, there is the kind of celebrities of your political party. In the case of the Democratic National Convention, there's also all kinds of celebrities. There are Hollywood celebrities. So it's really an interesting opportunity to meet lots of famous people. And I have an amazing scrapbook from that '92 convention. My daughter and I went. We were up in the nosebleed guest section. There was several open seats in front of us, right, kind of at the edge of this balcony overlooking the arena. And all of a sudden, this Secret Service agent showed up with the bug in his ear, and this woman with several children sat right in front of us. And I had a bit of a fangirl moment because it was Caroline Kennedy. And so I'm like, oh my God, it's Caroline Kennedy. And my daughter, who was 12 at the time, said to me, who is Caroline Kennedy? Which is awesome because it makes you feel really old. But she was there with her children attending the convention. The next to the last night of the convention, my husband was actually able to get 2 floor passes. So my son and I accompanied him, and were actually able to sit with the delegation on the floor of the convention hall. And we got to hear a speech from someone who is a candidate for the U.S. Senate that no one had ever heard of before, a guy with a funny name, Barack Obama. And it was an amazing speech, and it was one that electrified the nation and really put him on the road to then later run for president. And my son, who was just turned 18 at the time, said, "Oh my goodness, he's amazing. Mom, do you think that he could run for president one day?" And my husband and I both looked at him and said, "Oh yeah, he could run for president, but not anytime soon, because he's green and he's going to take time to grow into a senatorial role and everything." So yeah, 4 years later, he was president of the United States. And in fact, in that election, we were a split household in the primary. I voted for Hillary Clinton in 2008. My husband voted for John Edwards, and my son voted for Barack Obama. So it was an interesting time in our household. Well, some people refer to politics as showbiz for ugly people. It's just something that's always interested me. My father was an immigrant, and he took his citizenship really seriously. So we grew up in a household where we watched the evening news, and he was a CBS man. So we watched Walter Cronkite and Roger Mudd, and then we had dinner. And we discussed, even when we were teeny tiny, we discussed what we heard that night in the evening news. So we were raised to have a very strong sense of citizenship and civic engagement. And my father actually, we had a family business. We had a motel, a tourist motel on Route 1. And we lived on property a lot of my childhood, which is great training for politics, because, the guest is always right, and curb appeal, and making sure that people feel welcome is kind of second nature to me. But we actually housed a mayoral candidate's campaign headquarters in our motel. And so my dad would pick me up from school. Because my dad was kind of an interesting person. We would go eat oysters, and then we would go to the headquarters, and I would stuff envelopes. And I was 8 years old. I've kind of caught the bug, and I've had it ever since. So I've been involved in elective politics my entire life. I worked for a U.S. congressman, I was a poli-sci major in college. I worked for a congressman right out of college, and then I worked for a member of the state house. And then I joined the private sector in 1991, but I'm a consultant to cities and county governments. So this was a natural outgrowth of my interest in campaigns and in government. And it's just a way to get more involved. It's very interesting to watch, and I have to tell you, I'm just a tiny bit jealous of what the Republicans are going through right now, because honestly, delegates, it's an honor to be there. It is a reward for the work that you've done in your campaigns and in your community. But honestly, 99% of the time, when you get there, the nominee's already been selected. They've earned enough delegates that we know what the answer is going to be at the end of the week. There's no drama. And I tease sometimes that we're props with a pulse, because our job is to make sure that the convention looks great on camera. But it's an opportunity to hear speeches from both recognizable names in Democratic politics, but names you've probably never heard of. Like, for the example I gave you in 2004 with Barack Obama. So you see kind of the up-and-comers in your party. It's also an awesome opportunity to network and meet like-minded people from all over the United States, as well as people from within your state. And it's, you feel like you're kind of at the epicenter of politics at that moment when you're there. And it's just a very, very exciting time and an exciting thing to do. So I encourage everybody who's interested to try.